Please welcome to the stage our next keynote speaker, Ryan Breslow, founder and CEO of Bolt. Ryan will be interviewed by Drew Glover, co-founder, Fiat Growth and Fiat Ventures.
Ryan, good to see you, my man. So let's get started here. You have just taken the seat as the CEO of Bolt once again, and it's been 3 years. And so my main question for you is what's happened over these last 3 years?
Well, the last 3 years were certainly an interesting few years, and a challenging 3 years. I had, grown the company pretty aggressively, and we were very hot, and certain decisions I had made ran into conflict with some investors, and I was asked to step aside, which I did. And then some moves were made to even come after me further, and so resulted in some legal situations, which as of now have all been resolved and settled, so very glad to have that behind me. But about a year ago or so, a lot of our board members and our team were asking me, whether I'd consider coming back, and I really hadn't. And once enough people asked me, I'm more excited about Bolt than ever, and the idea started to warm up to me, and here we are.
When you left Bolt, it was a very different market. It was big, meteoric rounds for different startups. It was growth by any means necessary for a lot of startups. I'm curious, when you look back on it, what mistakes do you think you made, and what did you learn?
Yeah, I made a ton of mistakes. The last few years were a very humbling experience for me. I didn't make the mistakes that I was accused of making, but I made plenty of other mistakes. We're very loud, very bold. Being very public has its upside, but also has ramifications that, I had to deal with. And we were raising rounds, relatively quickly. And when someone joins your cap table, you're now married to that person. And we had a lot of people joining our cap table that I didn't know very well, or oftentimes had only met for, 20, 30 minutes. So, those ramifications, obviously, when things are going well, everything's great. And when things aren't going well, it's not as great. So I learned, I think, some key lessons about how to pick partners, how to be, more thoughtful with these things, and also how to manage through crisis.
Yeah, and I know one of the larger controversies was the loan that you specifically took out personally. And do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more light on what happened there specifically?
Yeah, sure. This is my first time really talking publicly in a few years, and I kind of stay silent in the media, so a lot of the stuff I didn't really comment on. The loan is particularly disappointing because back when I took it out of the company, it was done to be pro-Bolt, meaning I took it out instead of selling any meaningful secondaries. I wanted to show all of our investors that I'm keeping all my chips in. I believe so much in the stock that I'm not selling my shares. And so it was unanimously approved by our board at the time, which had a lot of my institutional lead investors on the board. They all unanimously approved it, and many of the investors even applauded it. And really appreciated that I wasn't selling shares. And so this was one of the tougher situations I dealt with, because after I had agreed to the request to take a step back, I got a call from the board, and they said, hey, this loan that you have, I had it until IPO. So I thought I had plenty of time to pay it back. And I got a call one day that they had kind of changed their mind and were going to call the loan. And so that was a very interesting situation. And once something gets legal, you can't really go to the media. So it was a bit of an attack. And Thankfully, I dealt with it, and I think the truth prevails. And I gained a lot of respect for our court system, and we found a good resolution, and it's all behind me. But yeah, that was a particularly disappointing situation, given that I did it to be all in on Bolt for the long run.
Yeah. Thanks for providing some clarity on that.
Yeah.
To jump to a separate topic, over the years, Bolt's valuation has fluctuated in a pretty large way, and now with you stepping back in, it has a new valuation. And I'm just so curious, as you think about the fluctuation, how do you kind of see the path forward here as it pertains to the valuation, where the company is, and where you guys are headed?
Well, I always believed we raised at pretty fair valuations. I think we have a very valuable company. We have an extended shopper network of 80 million wallets, many of which are directly enrolled Bolt wallets. And we've always raised off the back of our wallet network, meaning our revenue as a business was never what we led with. We sell, and actually to just back up for folks who may not know what we do, we sell a checkout product. So we have a fully managed end-to-end checkout where we'll manage the entire experience for a merchant, and then we have an embedded one-click, both of which are really products that we've innovated on, that were new to the market, that many competitors have now replicated, including very big incumbents, and we were the pioneers of that. And so in our checkout, we say, hey, we're gonna give you this great software, oftentimes at cost, but at the end of checkout, you have to put an opt-in for your users to enroll in our wallet network. So it's a bit of a trade with the merchant. And so we give this software away at cost. We call it our Trojan horse to get the wallets. The wallet has always been the play. And so we now have a huge shopper network. I think our company is more valuable now than it was even 3 years ago when we were hot and the market was frothy. And I think it shows the value and the network effect of our company and our product, meaning I stepped aside for 3 years and management fluctuated and we had all of this adversity, more adversity than any other startup that I'm aware of. And our shopper network 8x'd, and our product is still beloved by major retailers and producing higher conversions. And so now I'm stepping back, and even with everything going wrong, our product still triumphed at the end of the day, and I'm pretty proud of that.
And just for clarity for me in the audience, as you talk about the size of your shopper network, how does that compare to some of the other incumbents in the space, just so we get a sense of size?
Yeah, great question. I think a good comp is Revolut. They just raised a fairly big round, 50 billion. They're out of Europe. They're kind of a super app, Fintech, everything app. And they have, last time I checked, roughly 45 million wallets. So they're getting roughly $1,000 per user in terms of their comp and their valuation. We had about that same valuation multiple during our Series Z, where we raised from a lot of very big institutional players, from BlackRock to HIG to Invis and Schoenfeld and Affirm, Credities. I mean, the list goes on. We raised from a lot of very big folks where we went through their very rigorous due diligence and they stroked meaningful checks. And nothing has changed since then, except our shopper network has grown by many multiples, and our checkout product has shown its resilience. And so, Revolut is much further ahead in terms of monetizing the network. We haven't monetized our consumers yet. And that's going to start soon. I had a lot of that in motion before I stepped out as CEO. And that was unfortunately decommissioned network under that management. One of my first initiatives is bringing that back. We're going to be launching the Bolt app, which is a super app and everything app extending the one-click universe. So instead of one-click checkout, we're going to have one-click everything: financial services, peer-to-peer, crypto, cards, financial products, all in one app. Many of the products you'll be pre-approved for. And Revolut spent I believe it was about 300 million in marketing to acquire new users. Last year was roughly 8 million new users. Our last 8 million users came for free because of our checkout product. So we don't have to spend anything on marketing. We have built-in distribution, massive distribution, and we're in the US. The US shopper is the holy grail. I mean, they spend 30 to 40% more than a European shopper. So I think we have a real opportunity to win this super app race in the US, and that product's going to be launching very soon.
Awesome. And I will say, from 3 years ago till now, we are in a very different technical ecosystem in terms of being able to build quickly, iterate faster. I'm curious, as you think about AI, as you think about some of the technologies that are now here that weren't here when you were in the CEO role last time. How are you feeling, and how are you implementing some of this new stuff into the infrastructure?
Well, AI is obviously the hot topic. We're leveraging it for our fraud and our risk, personalized checkout experiences. But, I'm not really, we're using it to some degree, but we're not, we're a fintech company. Our goal is to make financial services and products as easy as possible for consumers. AI obviously helps us reduce costs, and we leverage it, but a lot of people have asked me, what's Bolt 2.0? It's actually the same as 1.0. We are launching all the same products we intended on launching. We're launching the Super App, which has been in almost all of our pitch decks since the beginning. It's always been the plan. And our checkout is, we're trying to bring the space to a one-click or even a zero-click future. I believe the future of checkout is no checkout. And I think that, this idea of an end-to-end, a form you fill out, might not exist in the next 5-10 years. So we hope to usher in that future.
Awesome. And just rolling into that, I'm so curious what the future of checkout looks like to you. Next 5, 10, 20 years. Right now, things are moving faster than they've ever moved before. But as you think about the future, how do you kind of describe it in your mind? And I'm curious how you even tie that back to building a team to grow into that future.
Well, I believe the future of checkout, as I said, is one click or no click. It's making the checkout disappear. And so historically, we have really done well in e-commerce. We are very dominant, particularly in enterprise e-commerce. One of our very large customers is Revolve, publicly listed company. They've been using us for a while. We're rolled out on Revolve.com and all of their sub-brands. They did an A/B test with us. They had a gold standard checkout using all available tools before. And after, they ran the A/B test with their data, not even our own, and we showed a 10% higher conversion. Right, so you have these very large, publicly listed enterprise clients using Bolt. We have our first LVMH brands, we have our first Richemont Group brands, and a lot of really big brands that we haven't announced that have already signed that are going live imminently. And so, however, we see a big opportunity beyond e-commerce. So in e-commerce, we're going to be expanding to small, medium size. We're going to be launching self-service, which former management was against for a bit. And some other things, they were against digital goods, subscriptions, businesses, developer-focused checkout we're also going to be launching. So we're going to be launching checkout in every form and trying to bring it all to one click at the same time.
Awesome. I want to make sure we spend the last part of this conversation talking about what I think there's no better person to kind of speak on is really just advice to founders. And founders going through tough times, from your perspective, what is your advice for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. Bolt, for those who don't know, we're on our 11th year. We're 11 years old. So I've been doing this for a while. I started the company when I was 19. And it's been quite the journey. We started this business, Fintech wasn't even hot. These things didn't really exist. checkout was kind of an uninvestable category. We were stealth for our first 4 years, 5 years. So there was a whole battle and a time completely out of the spotlight where I believed so much in this business before we even, had our kind of run where we became more known and raised at those high valuations. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. Now, fast forwarding to the last 3 years, I would say I learned quite a few lessons about how to manage a company through crisis. And that's probably enough for many more hours of discussions, but I can give some quick hits here. I think first and foremost is your culture. We always developed a very strong culture of all-in believers. People really believed in the business. We called it conscious culture, where we bridge execution with humanity. You have to execute, but if you do, we have a workplace with a lot of humanity. And a lot of people at our company stayed through impossibly tough times. And when I say impossibly, I mean where most of my advisors, attorneys told me it was impossible to come out the other side of this. And what was in the press and legal and government, I mean, it looked impossible. And we couldn't have made it out the other side without a strong culture of fearless warriors who were committed to the vision and believed we would make it through. So that's part one. Part two is a really aligned board. We had a board of warriors who believed in the long-term vision, whereas before we had some folks who didn't, and that kind of caused a lot of disruption because you had folks who stopped believing and who wanted to maybe sell or other outcomes. You need alignment. If you want to sell, okay, well, that's fine, have a board that wants to go in that direction, but we were always all in, and we needed to make sure our board was all in, and once we finally got that right, we were able to withstand the challenges. Also, I would say legal is very important when you're going through crisis. You have to really take charge of your legal strategy. We've hired basically all the top law firms. I mean, you name a top law firm, there's a good chance we've hired them and even fired them or had them quit on us. Or I mean, it was a crazy experience. We went through so many top law firms, and I ultimately realized I needed to take responsibility for the legal strategy, and our board needed to take responsibility for the legal strategy, and we needed to think critically. We couldn't just follow attorneys blindly. We had to listen to them very closely and take their advice seriously, but ultimately we had to determine our own legal strategy and take charge of that. And because of that, we were able to do things that a lot of law firms thought were impossible: find peace, find settlements, find outcomes that were really good, that were really win-win for our business, and ultimately resulted in now 3 years of a multi-front really battle. Now as of today, really first time I can say this in 4 years, all legal cases fully settled, dismissed. So really an incredible opportunity in front of us. And then, what I'd say more on the emotional side is I'm a warrior, but the last 3 years challenged me to my breaking point and beyond my breaking point and beyond. And you learn a lot about yourself, and it really challenged my faith in myself. It challenged my faith in Bolt. And ultimately, I think I made it out the other end because I didn't let that faith break. I believed in myself. I believed the right outcome was possible. And I kept very strong in that faith. And, a lot of founders call me, who many of you know, some prominent founders in prominent companies, when they don't have anybody else to call because they know, my stuff has been very public. Everyone knows what's happened to me, but a lot of these things happen behind closed doors when there's a lot of money involved, and particularly money makes people go a little bit crazy. And when there's a lot of money involved, investors and LPs, and so it can be a challenging situation. And so a lot of founders have called me and said, what do I do? All my advisors are telling me to give up and quit and cave, and I've told them the opposite, which is, you have to fight, and obviously try to find peace too. You can't just fight for the sake of fighting. You have to try to find peace where possible. Peace should be your number one priority, but you have to stand up for yourself. And many have come back to me 6 months later saying, if I didn't speak to you, I probably would have lost my company. And so I think it's important to fight for what you believe is right, especially when it comes to a company you've built. And that's what I got.
That's great. And just we have time for one last question. In one sentence, now that you're back in the CEO seat, what are you most excited about?
I'm super excited. I feel like I've returned home. I got my ryan@bolt.com email back for the first time in almost 3 years. And I'm in my Slack channels and meeting with the whole team. And it's just, the energy is electric. I think I've come out of the experience of the last 3 years with a couple, probably PhDs in law and governance, and had and fundraising and dealing with situations. And so I think I'm coming out of the situation a little bit wiser. I'll still obviously make mistakes, but I've got a very big chip on my shoulder. I'm ready to take Bolt to really new heights, and I think we have a lot of clarity. We learned a lot through the last 3 years of what doesn't work and who we aren't, and I think we really know who we are now. And all these different products and the innovation we're driving, we're always the most innovative in the checkout space, and we're only going to step that up going forward.
I love it. Thanks so much for spending time with us today, Ryan.
Such a
pleasure.
pleasure.